Due to the graphic nature of this program, viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome to the Marco Dure Show, everybody. It is Wednesday, August 6th. Thanks for tuning in to today's show that will give you all the groundbreaking news across our country, across the world, where the facts are facts and hard truths thrive. Please be sure to like and follow and share the show with others to get this information out. I do appreciate it every time you do that. So thank you for that. I know that the show is growing slowly but surely, so I do appreciate you all. Let's get ready for the best hour that radio has to offer, uncensored and ready to go. Let's jump right into the fire today. We've got some positive news coming out today. And this was in a Truth Social tweet by President Trump. He says that my special envoy, Steve Witkoff, just had a highly productive meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Great progress was made. Afterwards, I updated some of our European allies. Everyone agrees this war must come to a close, and we will continue to work towards that in the days and weeks to come. Thank you for your attention on this matter. So while this is a positive assessment here, this is good news for sure, we don't really know what was being said at this meeting. We're never told what's going on. We're never told what the terms of peace would be or a ceasefire, what would be needed to reach that. We're just told, hey, everything's looking positive. We're making progress. But they've been telling us this for months now. Trump says this last week, hey, we had a good phone call, but, we keep bombing people. So now I'm going to threaten them with Ohio-class nuclear subs. It's unbelievable. So while this is a positive post, we don't seem to be getting anywhere with this. And I think the main problem is that Putin and Russia's and the Kremlin's terms are not being met. What needs to happen, I've been telling you this before, and I'll say it again. What needs to happen, we need to get rid of Zelensky. He needs to go. All right? The little putz needs to go. Get rid of him. Bon voyage. Let him take his Bugatti and all the other money that he stole from us and take it wherever he wants. I don't give a damn. But we need real elections in Ukraine. We need a real president that can sign off on this. Zelensky is the de facto president right now. He's staying longer than his term has expired already. So he's acting as this leader? Can he even sign off on any of this? What the hell's going on in Ukraine? Who's making these decisions? Yes, he's the face of it all, but can he really sign off on any of this? And if another president is duly elected and comes in, can he just say, hey, we didn't agree to any of this. You're a nothing. You weren't even a president at the time. And then, of course, we go back into the same conflict. This is the problem here. I think Putin understands this. Trump should understand this, and so should Witkoff and Rubio. But they have to understand. Zelensky is the person that's blocking all of this. He said for his terms for Russia, and I've told you this before, they need to give back the Donbass, they need to give back Crimea, they need to pay war reparations to Ukraine now. And again, there is no negotiation that they would prevent themselves from joining NATO, which is a massive concern for Vladimir Putin. Putin's terms are going to be very simple, though. Ukraine cannot join NATO. They need to sign off on that right now. They can't join NATO. Ukraine needs to demilitarize, as in you can't be storing NATO rockets and missiles inside Ukraine. That's a major red flag right there for them. They're not going to go for it. And they have to leave Crimea. They have to leave the Donbass region. That'd be Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, Kursk. All those regions. They need to get away from them. They're done. Russia is going to take that territory. And then I think you will see things end in this situation. But until that happens, until those negotiations are met, it's going to keep continuing this conflict. And that's why we see this war of attrition continuing on. Trump should understand this by now. He should understand this by now. This is something that is very well known. I know this. The Kremlin has come out and said these things. They're not just going to roll over for Ukraine, whose ass they're kicking. I hate to tell you like that, but they are destroying Ukraine right now. Because this senseless war has continued on and on and on. And it needs to stop. Now, it made the Wall Street Journal, which is a nice thing. I think that's great. And again, Trump cites this progress after this Putin-Witkoff meeting, but no peace deal. So where are the advances towards peace? Why can't they sit down together? And Trump should be there, by the way, and hash this out. You know, we're giving them these ultimatums. We're giving them, these sanctions and what have you, putting more new tariffs on other BRICS nations. It's ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous. And the other thing is, now that all this happened last week with this deployment of the Ohio-class submarines that have nuclear capacity, that were supposed to be in the region where it could hit Russia, now you have to ask yourself, is Putin going to believe that Trump will honor any type of peace agreement? You have to understand that now. I mean, this has so gotten out of hand, I don't know what will happen. Trump says he wants to sign off on the New START treaty, which is an arms reduction treaty. That's a positive thing. We need this. But, we're giving them these ultimatums, giving them these deadlines is not going to be productive. It's not going to be productive at all. So, did we learn anything today? Did we learn anything new? Are we going to keep continuing these massive tariffs on some of these nations? Only time will tell, but this needs to get hashed out soon, folks. This is what needs to happen. I don't think you're going to see it soon. I think if this war is going to continue on as long as it's going to continue on, because there's been no advances towards any real sense of peace here. And again, all those proclamations that they want are easily met. Ukraine doesn't join NATO. Perfect. They shouldn't even be thinking about joining NATO. They got a violation of the Minsk agreement. They've obviously, the ethnic Russians in these regions I mentioned, Russia wants to control it. They're not going to give up Crimea either, by the way. I don't even understand this. Russia's fleet has been there for so long. That's where they're stationed. They're not going to give that up. So the idea that, again, Zelensky is the person blocking all this. Zelensky needs to get out of the picture. It needs to end. It's over. Tell him goodbye. Tell him to get lost. Tell him to go back to being a failed comedian, actor, whatever the hell he was before the war, before he took office. And Trump and Putin need to sit down and get this done. And Trump should say, we're not leaving this room until we get this solved. I want this over. And we can end this. And he has to also stop sending Ukraine arms. That's another big issue. He's wondering why the war continues on. Well, because you keep arming Ukraine. And the slaughter of Ukrainians continues on. So while I'd like to hear positive things like this, and again, I do think that Trump is a man that wants peace, but the people around him are not either negotiating properly on his terms, or they are pushing him in a position that's extending this war. And again, he is the leader, so he's the one that makes the final call. But this needs to end. We need to be advocating for peace, not more war. So stop sending the arms, ladies and gentlemen. That's all that really needs to happen, and you'll see that war fizzle out in no time. So, a little bit of positivity. I like that. I like that there's at least talks now. Before, we were even talking to them. There was no diplomacy at all. It was ultimatums and, threats. These threats of nuclear war, for God's sakes. Can't happen. Can't work that way. You're not going to bully Russia, folks. They have very, very superior arms. Unless, of course, we're talking about nuclear arms. So, I'd like peace. I don't want to see conflict. I don't want to see more bloodshed. Unnecessary deaths of Ukrainians and Russians. I don't want to see it. You don't want to see this. We don't want to waste any more money on this. So, the idea is, of course, let's stop sending these arms. Let's let Putin and Trump sit down face to face, come to an agreement, tell Ukraine you need to set up elections, you need to make this deal. There it is. That's all. That's all you really can hope for. Because, again, Ukraine is not winning this war. You can send all the arms you want, they're not winning this war. I've said that to you for a long time now. That's the end result of this awful conflict. That could have been over in a month, by the way. But here we are 3.5 years later. Let's talk about this Hill article that I have here. And it says, here's what's next in this Texas redistricting battle. You've been hearing this ad nauseum now. And, of course, the Texas Democrats are entering their fourth day after fleeing the state to block Republicans from passing a gerrymandering map that would offer the GOP 5 pickup opportunities in the House election next year. So everyone's thinking about 2026. And everyone wants more control, more position. The Republicans have a razor-thin majority in the House. And so they want to solidify that the Democrats might take this back. That's what they want. And again, if they get back in the House, they're not going to give Trump anything. We saw that once before. So it is very important that Speaker Johnson gets out there and, again, campaigns, especially in some of these purple districts, and let it be known. What is our policy moving forward? That should be what's being said. How are we going to make things better for Americans? Now, I saw recently he's over in Israel right now for some strange reason. I don't understand that at all. Talking about how the Bible tells us we need to, I guess, submit to Israel. I don't know why he was there. I don't understand this. But it's clear as mud why he's there. I just don't know why he's not working for Americans. That's my whole problem with that. So after a Texas House committee advanced these new congressional lines, which again happens every 10 years, every time there's a new census, they called for a special session, as many of you know. And of course, Democrats left the Lone Star State to deny Republicans a quorum. They need at least 51 members to proceed. And of course, in response, Texas Governor Greg Abbott has called for the arrest of the Democrats, which I thought was pretty interesting, and has now ordered Texas Rangers to launch a probe into the lawmakers for a possible bribery and other violations. So a lot of them are fleeing to, again, heavily gerrymandered states. They're going to Illinois and they're complaining about gerrymandering, where I believe there are 3 congressional seats in that whole massive state. They're going to Massachusetts where there's zero Republican congressional seats. You can't make some of this stuff up, by the way. Yeah, they go to Massachusetts. 36% of the populace voted for Donald Trump in 2024. Guess how many congressional seats? 0. Connecticut. Some went to Connecticut, too. 41% of the population, almost 42%. Guess how many House seats they hold? 0. New Jersey. 46% of the state voted for Donald Trump. Guess how many GOP elected House seats? 25. New Mexico, 45.9% voted for Donald Trump. And we thought that was a state he could have won. Certainly thought it was possible. Things seem to be shifting in New Mexico. Guess how many House seats they hold in New Mexico? 0. New York, 43.7% voted for Donald Trump. And again, it's a massive blue state. Obviously, you have New York City as the outlier. But New York State is a heavily populated state. And it's a deep blue state. So the idea that they got, 43%, almost 44% of the state is pretty remarkable when you think about it. Given the fact that, think of how many people have fled the state. Thanks to people like Andy Cuomo and the wonderful Bill de Blasio as New York City mayor. How many House seats are in the state of New York? To reflect the population, only 26.9%. Yeah. And the same goes with California, by the way. California, there was... Donald Trump got 38% of the vote here in California. I think almost 39%, something like that. I think it was 38.4%, if I'm not mistaken. Over 6 million votes. And of the 52 congressional seats, we lost a congressional seat, by the way, thanks to Gavin Newsom, thanks to the exodus out of California. That should tell you something. Each congressional seat is roughly 750,000 people. And we were at 54 at one point. Now we're at 52. Guess how many are Republican-held seats in California? 9. 9. Or 17%. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So the idea that they're going to these states and complaining, crying over what's being done, you have to understand something. In these last couple of years, ever since COVID, there has been a mass exodus out of states like California, all the states I mentioned, California, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Jersey, Illinois. All these states lost population, and a lot of population. And who gained were Florida, Tennessee, Arizona, Texas, primarily Texas. And they're acting like this is something that should be shocking. Well, again, your congressional seats should reflect your current populace, yes? And I know what people are going to say. They're going to say, well, Gervais, come on. Every 10 years, we make a new list. The congressional lines stay the same. Okay, we can make that argument. But again, when you have this influx of people into these areas, and so many, I mean, there is, again, I tell you, there is a mass exodus of people going to Arizona, going to Texas, going to Tennessee, going to Florida, going to North Carolina. Wherever they're going, they're getting out the hell out of these blue states. So the representation, they believe, in this state, again, it's a state's right to do that. They believe that, again, it should mirror what the population looks like. Now, people in the Democratic Party, especially in Texas, are miffed about this because many of them, 5 of them, are in now these, purple seats, you will say. Or at least they maybe favor Republicans now, depending on how the lines are drawn. One of them being Jasmine Crockett. Right? The gift that keeps on giving, Jasmine Crockett, every time she opens her stupid mouth. Yeah, she called Trump Hitler the other day. That woman. Yeah, she's really representative of the people of Texas. I'm very sure. I'm very sure. Now, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, who is running for the Senate against Tom Cornyn, who I like, by the way. I think he should have been Attorney General. I have to say. Ken Paxton is a stalwart conservative, I must say. He's pretty good. He declared that he would seek judicial orders declaring that runaway Democrats who fail to appear by the Speaker's deadline have vacated their office. So it seems like, for now, at least, they're in this two-party standoff. So what will happen? I mean, they can't come back to a quorum until these Democrats come back. This has happened before. I mean, it happened in Texas, 2003. I don't know why they flee the state. Why do they just not show up to work? Why are they going to these other states? Again, taking bribes from people like J.B. Pritzker, right? They get these press ops and what have you. And again, they make it sound like this has never been done before. They do it all the time. And again, Republicans have done it all the time. I read that to you on Monday's show. Even in California, back in 1950s, they were talking about the Republicans gerrymandering. Because again, it was a blood red state at the time. 1960, things changed. So again, they favored more Democratic seats. And now California is the crapshoot that it is today. There you go. So they make lines of districts that will benefit them. And they collapse the Republican districts, making it smaller. They don't change the, voter polls, or voter rolls, excuse me, like here in California. They don't ever change them. They don't clean out the rolls. So we have no idea who's living where. You're told your district is, plus Democrat 30. You have no idea. You have no clue. But, then the end result comes in, your congressional seat, their candidate won by 68%. You go, oh, well, it makes sense, I guess. Plus 30 district, you have no idea. And especially in a state, here's the funny part. You're in a state like California or Illinois or New York, where they don't even require you to show ID to vote in these elections, these federal elections. And they sit here and talk about how it's Republicans that are destroying democracy. Now, I'll remind you, we don't live in a democracy, although we have Democratic-run elections. But, we have people like Obama now, right? Obama coming out saying on X, we can't lose focus on what matters right now. Texas are trying to gerrymander district lines to unfairly win 5 seats in next year's midterm elections. This is a power grab that undermines our democracy. Now, he's from Illinois, as I just said to you. And they only have 3 congressional seats. I mean, the whole state looks red when you look at these congressional seats, almost. It's that out of touch with reality. It's that out of touch with reality. So he's trying to make himself relevant. He's not. I mean, it's pretty ridiculous, of course. But this is what we get from Obama, former president. It makes no sense whatsoever. It's not something new under the sun. This happens all over the place. The people in charge want to maintain power, so they make districts that will reflect that. Now, Texas is doing this early because, again, you have all these conservatives, and mostly conservatives, I would have to say, fleeing to Texas. A lot of people are fleeing to red states right now. They've had enough of Connecticut, of Massachusetts, of New York, of New Jersey, of California, of Oregon, of Washington. One of the blue cesspool, Illinois. There you go. They're getting out of these cities. They're getting out of these states. They can't take it anymore. So for Obama to come out and post something like that, I mean, gerrymandering has been perfected in his home state of Illinois. So it's just stupid. It carries no water. And it's funny. It really is funny to me that it's so ridiculous that Obama thinks that made any difference in anything. So pathetic, I have to say, folks. You know, it's interesting to me, too. I got to segue into this article now. There's been leaked FBI documents that now suggest that Jeffrey Epstein was a secret FBI informant. Now, we've known about this. We've been hearing things about this. In 2018, the Gateway Pundit reported that Jeffrey Epstein was not just protected by federal authorities, get this, but may have actively worked as an informant for the FBI under former Director Robert Mueller. You all remember the Mueller investigation, right? Now, according to these uncovered documents that were released by the Freedom of Information Act, a FOIA lawsuit, it says the following. Take a listen to this. On 9/11/2008, case agent advised writer that Epstein is currently being prosecuted by the state of Florida. You all remember that case, right? Where he was, again, charged for soliciting and sexual activity with a minor, and is complying with all conditions of his pleas with the state of Florida. Epstein has also provided information to the FBI as agreed upon. Case agent advised that no federal prosecution will occur in this matter as long as Epstein continues to uphold his agreement with the state of Florida. Remember, he got that sweetheart deal. So again, this is absolutely absurd to me. Case agent also advised that no further forfeiture assistance will be required for this case. Case agent is requested to contact writer in the event that this matter moves forward on a federal level. So they were never going to prosecute him for any federal crimes. And again, this is, clear as mud, as sure as I'm sitting here, that Epstein had ties to our intel, as we've said before, many, many times over again. I mean, I let's say I can't believe it, but it makes perfect sense here. They have the FBI document right here. This is on vigilantfox.com. Yeah, there it goes. The case is for child prostitution, and they give him a sweetheart deal. They gave him a sweetheart deal on this. It's mind-boggling. It really is mind-boggling. So, you know, we see these things, we see them obviously get out of hand and what have you. I mean, this is obviously a smoking gun, this document. You know, this is where we are right now in this case. So, again, are they protecting these Epstein files for several reasons? Does he have ties to other intel agencies across the globe? Now, my gut is telling me yes, of course he does. I've heard some people speaking who are very versed on this topic that say absolutely he was in with Mossad. I've said to you before, he knew four different Israeli prime ministers, Ehud Barak being one that was a close friend of his. Knew one of the presidents of Israel. These things like this. And it begs, again, his mistress, his girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell. Her father was a Mossad agent in the intel world. So, again, it's not unreasonable to think that Epstein has ties, again, being an FBI informant in the United States, knowing all these popular people that are financing him for reasons unknown, other than the idea that he is doing the bidding of Mossad. We've known about this. And one other tell on this, I'll go on this before we move on. One other big tell of this was right when this case was breaking out. Of course, Pam Blondie was getting out there and going, well, there's nothing else to see here, move on. You had the Kash Patel come out, say the same thing. Dan Bongino came out, said the exact same thing. Hey, there's nothing there. He killed himself. It's over. It was just him. Forget about it. I saw the files. Move on. First of all, there's been these massive payouts by Chase Bank, by Deutsche Bank, among others, to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars to over 250 different victims. So we certainly need to get to the bottom of this. We certainly need to know what happened to at least some degree. And we need to know for sure that no one else was involved in this. But obviously, folks, if you have Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein being arrested for procuring, which means you're soliciting for sexual activity for other people, right? That was his first case. He was arrested for that. That tells you pretty clearly that he was doing this for other people as well, not just himself. You don't bug your room with video recording equipment all throughout your house unless, again, there's something pretty nefarious going on there. Now, can I say exactly what happened? I have no idea what happened exactly. We don't know who else is involved in this. And again, Trump came out and said he doesn't want any of this to, again, blow out in the open when we, have people just flying on a jet. Doesn't indicate that someone committed a crime. Okay, that's fine. That's fair. But it is a bit odd, though. If you're flying on a jet to this island now, where we know some of these crimes have been committed. We know this for sure. And you have to ask yourself, okay, why were these people going to this island then? Just to hang out? I mean, come on. Let's be real here. How long can we put our head in the sand on this? The way that we get to the bottom of this, we need to get to these victims. We need to make sure they ID certain people that have been involved in this, for sure. For sure. And this is how we make a case on this. And this is what the FBI should be doing right now. This is what the DOJ should be doing. Not just looking for a black book with people's names in it. There should be a case where someone is prosecuted and tried. So far, 0 people have been tried in this entire case. Which to me is absolutely absurd. Absolutely absurd on this whole front. Nothing like this should be happening. Especially on this level, this scale. I mean, this is abhorrent. Abhorrent behavior. Now we'll know if there's justice if people begin to be arrested. But notice how they're not saying anything about this case right now. It's been a completely quiet as of late, folks. Don't you think so? Everything has been super, super quiet on the Epstein front, and I wonder why. And I wonder if it'll go away. I hope not. I hope we get to the bottom of this. Only time will tell, folks. But again, I'm not going to hold my breath on this, and neither should you. We've seen all these things. We talked now about the Russia gate hoax with Obama. Do I think anything's going to happen with that either? No. Of course not. Of course not. Nothing's going to happen there. Let's move on, shall we? Let's get on to the next topic. Let's move on to this article. I wanted to read this to you the other day, but I didn't have time. We ran out of time on this, unfortunately. It says it's the worst decade to be an American farmer. Oh, not a good thing. Not something I want to hear, especially when we've had, since Joe Biden took office, over 111 different food processing plants go up in smoke, be destroyed, and of course not rebuilt. Not a good thing. It says here that American farmers are now locked in a generational crisis, fending off an array of threats that could jeopardize food supplies and spell financial disaster for those often hailed as the backbone of the nation, and which they are, by the way. They absolutely are farmers. Now, the current storm of rising debt, declining commodity prices, and labor shortfalls has begun the echo to the great farm crisis of the 1980s, and may be testing the love farmers hold for their own profession. This is happening right now in 2025. Understand this. And I remember I told you about these bubbles that get bigger. They burst. When you have over $1 trillion in student federal loan debt, that is a lot of money. When you have credit card debt in America that reaches over $1 trillion, that's a lot of money. When you have the real estate bubble, I told you that 20% of brick and mortars are now empty. That means no one's in these office buildings paying any type of rent or mortgage on them. What's going to happen to these buildings? They're going to go bust. That's going to create a huge slew of problems, ladies and gentlemen. But in the farm sector debt now, it's expected to reach $561.8 billion by the end of 2025. This is according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and it's up 3.7% from 2024. So this growing financial pressure now has, again, pushed bankruptcies, as you would imagine. Not a good thing. Not a good thing. Now, you have to understand something. With a lot of this, farmers never set their own prices. Whether it be a crop farmer, the people that plant crops, of course, corn, whatever you have here. And if you're a livestock farmer, dairy farmer, rancher, you name it, again, they never are able to set their prices for their commodity that they're producing, which I think overall is a problem because it takes a certain dollar sign to raise the product, to obviously feed, to house, to clean, you name it. It all costs money, folks. And again, if the farmers are getting slighted on their whatever price they need to make a profit, and they're not making that profit, then they got to go get loans from the banks. They got to go get a loan, and of course, how are they going to pay that back if they're not creating any type of profit? A couple of years ago, I was listening on California Insider, and they had these two farmers in the Central Valley of California. And I forget if they were almond farmers or whatever they were, but they said the cost of water, to produce their product, to go out and do just that, was almost dead even with their profit. So they were barely making a profit on their commodity. They said this is the first time this has happened to us ever. And again, I look back to what Gavin Newsom does with the water. Now, instead of creating new reservoirs in California, again, this is just one of many examples this could be, but instead of making new reservoirs, storing more water when we have particularly wet years like we had the last 2 years in 2023 and in 2024, extremely wet years. There was so much water that fell and hit California, the entire state would be flooded with a foot of water. That's how much water the state got. Now, what does Gavin Newsom do in a year just like that? Does he build more reservoirs? No, of course not. What does he do? He pushes it right onto the Pacific Ocean, folks. And then we wonder why we don't have any water in our fire hydrants when there's a fire. And by the way, they're still having trouble doing that. Just thought I'd mention that to you. But this gets back to my point. Why not keep a steady supply for farmers when they need it to have more water so that way they can at least lower their pricing for what you're charging them to alleviate some of the stress on them? They don't do that. So let's talk about this soybean, corn, and wheat farmer. Goes by the name of Boyd. He has 1,500 acres here in Virginia. Raises 150 head of beef cattle. He told Newsweek that 2025 marked the first time in his career where he was unable to receive an operating loan, which provides farmers working capital needed to cover daily expenses. And of course, he blamed this on the trade policies of the current administration. That's another thing that's hitting, folks, that many farmers are not simply happy with. He said that he was turned down by banks for the simple fact of low commodity prices due to the president's tariffs. So again, the banks look at this and say, is this a good investment for us? Now, if it's not, they're not going to give you that loan. If they don't think you can pay it back, they're simply not going to give you that loan. And this is the problem with, again, some of these farmers have on the situation that they're in. So again, the higher costs for foreign importers have dampened the foreign demand, leading to further reductions in the price of America's agricultural exports. So we have corn futures, for example. They've fallen about 15% since the start of this year. Mexico buys U.S. corn, China buys soybeans, but they can't survive on low crop prices with input costs at all-time highs. And so the input costs are what they have to do in order to create the product, whether it be feed for livestock, water for crops, whatever you need, whatever. If those are all-time highs now, how are they supposed to make a profit? And again, a lot of this has been coming down to these tariffs. And he says this Boyd says that he's been farming since 1983. So what is the end all to this? What is the end all to this? Why do I read this to you? Well, one, because we don't want to be in a situation where we're putting our American farmers out of business. That's number one. That's very important. Number two, we don't want our food supply to go away. So if we start losing, for example, a farmer that's producing, I guess, soybeans or corn or what have you, and again, those fields go dry and they go bare, and now we have to import corn from abroad because we're simply not making enough here, that becomes another problem. It's much easier to make a product here. We've been talking about this. So we need to live off our own land. That's what needs to happen. And we should do everything to protect the American farmer, not flood the country with cheaper produce or cheaper products that come from the agricultural sector. A May survey by Purdue University found that a strong majority of 70% of U.S. farmers believe that Trump's tariffs will strengthen U.S. agriculture. Well, I don't know. I just don't know about this. Doesn't seem like it. We saw this in the mid-90s, too, with the NAFTA agreement, right? Free trade between China and Canada. The U.S., Canada, and Mexico, excuse me. And what happened? Well, again, it was free trade, so there was no tariffs on anything. So what happened in Mexico? American corn just simply flowed right across the border. And what happened to those farmers in Mexico? There was an inundation of cheap corn. So people were buying American corn. And what happened to those corn farmers in Mexico? They put them out of business. This is what's happening right now in some regards of this market. Now, folks, I don't think I need to tell you that this year the labor shortfall for U.S. agriculture will exceed 400,000 jobs. This is a problem. Obviously, we talk about illegal immigration in the United States, and of course, and a lot of these big farms, not the small or medium-sized farms, but a lot of these big farms, you have people working here that are illegally, and that could, again, come to a problem with a lot of these, again, big farms where they don't have the help to do so. So that becomes another issue here that we're seeing here with our food supply. And again, farms have been one of the key targets of this administration's crackdown. Again, I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying this is going to affect the system that they're already in. And again, worker shortages are a real thing. And again, if you can't pick the crops, they go rotting. I mean, that's got to be a big problem. It's going to become a major problem, I must say. So, the end result, Donald Trump needs to, again, not flood the country with cheaper agricultural products. We need to boost up our exports for our farmers that are producing, and we need to support our farmers. So any way you can support local farmers markets or what have you. I always tell you should know who your rancher or farmers are that are producing, so you know exactly where your products are coming from. And we don't want to just keep supporting overseas agriculture. That's the way it needs to be, folks. You got to start making some choices, maybe a little bit of sacrifice. But that will definitely plague U.S. agriculture should, again, this continue on. And again, the California Farm Bureau said there are provisions included in the big, beautiful bill that benefit U.S. farmers and ranchers, but a comprehensive farm bill is still needed. That is something that is still important. We need to protect our own, folks. That's really what it comes down to. I'm not saying we can't import anything, but we need to be supporting American farmers first. That's what it should be. Then you can have quotas come in from other nations if they want to sell their products here in the United States. But it shouldn't be overflowing or abundant, because then you're going to put our guys out of business. And so we don't want to put people out of business. That's what it comes down to, folks. And we saw that in the Reagan years. Well, I didn't see that in the Reagan years, but most people saw that in the Reagan years that were much older than I am. We saw some 250,000 farms go out of business. Not a good thing. Now, the people that made it through, again, same problem. During the 1970s, under the Nixon administration, yet Earl Butz was the head of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. They said, go big or go broke, things like that. So guys started, producing more. They took out more loans. Then, of course, you hit the late 1970s, inflation, high interest rates, and a lot of guys just couldn't seem to make it. By the time Reagan fixed it in the late 1980s, 250,000 farmers went out of business. 1,000 farmers committing suicide. Awful, folks. It's unnecessary. So we need to take care of our own. If we can find money for Ukraine, for Israel, for Egypt, all these other countries, we can find money for our farmers. And that's who we should be looking out after. All right, let's go on, shall we? Let's move on to this Wall Street Journal article I got here. And it's talking about the Trump $750 billion deal for the United States energy that collides with market reality, it says. And I thought this was interesting because we were very happy about that deal. And I tell you, Trump's been making very good business deals as far as getting people to invest in the United States, which is a good thing. I want people to invest in the United States. I want their money spent here. I want those manufacturing jobs. Actually, that will bring the economy to where it needs to be. Because right now we're Amazon packages and defense spending bills. I don't know what we stand for anymore. What do we produce here? We need to get back to our basics, if you will. So the European Union has promised Donald Trump $750 billion worth of American energy. Making good on that pledge will be a tall order, though, is what people in the energy sector have been saying. So this energy deal was this centerpiece of this trade agreement between Washington and Brussels, which last Sunday, which set this baseline of U.S. tariffs at 15% for most European goods coming in. And of course, the EU agreed to buy $250 billion worth of U.S. oil, natural gas, and nuclear fuels per year for 3 years. So, okay. Comes out to $750 billion. So think about it. They're going to spend $250 billion on U.S. oil per year. That's what Ursula von der Leyen pledged. And we were all happy about that. And we couldn't be any happier that Donald Trump made that deal. But what's the reality of the situation here? What's the reality of the situation? Can they use this much oil? I mean, what's going on here? Are they going to stop producing oil in other parts of Europe or getting it from other places? So to fulfill the pledge, the EU would have to purchase more than double the amount of American energy that it did last year. And the United States now has to react in kind. It needs to significantly ramp up its energy exports. Are we able to meet those needs? So the commitment appears to be more aspirational than realistic, is what certain analysts have said. We have purchases of the agreed upon magnitude that would require a massive rearrangement of energy flows in the United States. We know Donald Trump has opened up more permits, of course. But again, we have to think about these are private companies now, which constitute the majority of Europe's energy importers, right? So it's not like we have a government-run oil program. So again, you have to also understand you're working with private companies. They have to invest. They have to do this work. So what do I tell you this for? Am I telling you this is not going to happen? I'm not telling you it's not going to happen. I'm just saying it's going to take probably a little while before this becomes a reality. The EU's largest oil supplier last year was the United States already, with 16% share of its imports. So, again, ramping up energy imports further hit the $250 billion target, which might be a stretch here. The EU imported 376 billion euros, which would be $440 billion in American money, worth of oil, natural gas, and coal from various countries last year. Roughly $65 billion of that came from the United States. So we've got to produce now over double that to reach the sum of $250 billion. And it goes on to say that even if the EU were to buy the entirety of the U.S. crude oil or the liquid natural gas exports, the value of its purchases would only total about $141 billion. And now another fundamental obstacle is that these private companies, not the governments, are going to be handling the energy procurement in the EU. So, I mean, you have someone sitting in Brussels saying, hey, we got this great deal. We want to buy from America. We're going to put this much money in. But you've got to get these private companies to come forward and meet that demand now. So I don't think it's going to happen overnight. Again, we could talk about if it's being practical. We know that companies have long-term supply agreements with other countries. Norway, we have Qatar, we have Algeria, definitely Saudi Arabia. They're already in contracts with these companies. And should these contracts be broken, the companies would now have to face certain financial penalties and probably lawsuits. Think of how much money that's going to cost. Think how much money they would have to pay. So while this is a good thing, I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I think it can happen eventually. We have to get our own ports in place to do this. We have to start doing our own drilling. Definitely, certainly more than we have. We were shut down basically during the Biden administration. And then you have to ask yourself here in America, is there going to be a type of environmental pushback? There's going to be large additions of U.S. energy that might clash with, obviously, the EU goals of reducing fossil fuel consumption. Is that going to be a problem? I mean, all these things to consider. All these things to consider here, folks. Again, it's a dynamic market. It's a good deal, but is it totally realistic? I don't know. I can, prognosticate. Do I think it's going to work? I think it can work, certainly, for us. I know that, in recent years, Germany has gone back to even using coal now. So, again, I don't think it's impossible. I think it's just going to definitely take some time. This is not something that's going to be taking place overnight. We see that there's oil companies and these facilities in places like Louisiana and Texas that say this process will take several years to, again, meet that demand of putting out well over double what we're doing right now, just to deliver to, again, the EU. That's not even including what we're keeping here in the United States. And that's all she wrote on that one, folks. So we see this. We're happy again that Donald Trump is working out these deals. We've got to make sure we catch up, though. And again, I like the idea. You're going to produce more liquid natural gas, oil, petroleum, export more coal. Okay, great. That means more people are going to be working now in those sectors. I like that. And let's get those pipelines back up and running, shall we? Get some gas even cheaper here in the United States. The Trends Journal, though, has a little piece from yesterday I wanted to go over with you. And it says here, more bad job times ahead. And I don't say this to scare you. I just say this to you because this is the reality of the situation that we seem to find ourselves in. And it says that while Donald Trump fired the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics for reporting lousy job numbers, and again, he didn't back down, by the way, good for that, we wonder if he will attack challenger Gray and Christmas, who reported last Thursday that the United States retail sector recently cut 80,000 jobs from January to July of this year. This was a 249% spike in job losses as compared to the same time as last year. Now, this job report went on across the United States that there were over 800,000 job cuts from businesses and industries in the United States this year thus far. And in July alone, businesses fired more than 60,000 employees, which is nearly up 30% from last year's June year-over-year numbers. The job cuts have now spiked 40%. So, what is happening right now? We're being told we're winning, we're getting these great trade deals like the one I just mentioned to you. And what's the problem here? Why does it not seem to be meeting the demand for work? Why do we see that there was 800,000 jobs, lost just this year alone? when we're told that we're winning. Every time I turn on Fox, every time I turn on Newsmax, or I listen to some of my favorite conservative talk show hosts like yours truly, I listen to them and I think everything's perfect. We're winning. I can't believe we're winning so much. I mean, that's what we keep hearing. But are we winning so much? They're reporting the closing of stores and units or plants that have led to 120,000 layoffs this year so far. I mean, that's not a good thing. We want to be expanding. We want to be growing. We need to start meeting more demands. Just bankruptcies alone for business accounted for another 35,641 layoffs. So, again, retail in America is really, obviously, the bottom line. It's some 2/3 of the gross domestic product that is generated from consumer spending. And again, as these firings intensify, as the retail stores keep closing, the economy will continue to weaken. And that's what we're seeing right now, folks. And again, I don't say this to you to scare you. I say this so you can get prepared. And again, therefore, there will be a strong equity market correction. And again, this is dismissal of this dismal economic conditions will, again, make gold prices shine as you see the value of the dollar begin to weaken. Oh, yeah. Yeah, folks, this is not a positive thing. But again, this is reality. This is what's happening around us. That's why I saw incredibly low job numbers just last month. So, again, I say this to you because this is the reality of the situation. Obviously, if you're one of these people, you've got to now find a new job. Times are tough. Times are tough right now. We just had years of stagflation under Joe Biden, which was not a good thing. It wasn't positive for businesses at all. And while we see it in some states that are growing, like in Florida, like in Texas and Tennessee, like in Arizona, other states are losing populations in many respects. So you see a lot of these job closings as well. And let's not forget, I told you before, a lot of people are working remote now. They're working from home. That means you have a lot of these brick and mortars, 20% at least in America, that are empty. Who's going to pay that money to keep those buildings operating? How are they going to pay that debt that they're in? Again, how are they going to pay the property, make the rent? They're not. So those are going to go bust as well. And when those go bust, we're going to be in a lot of trouble because that's a very, very big issue, especially with those brick and mortars. So, not a good thing, folks. Not a good thing. That's a little bit, again, it's going to take a while for this economy to take off. It's going to take a while for this economy to take off. That's all I'm going to tell you. I think Trump can revive the economy, but he's got to get these tariffs squared away. That's another big problem. You heard about what the farmers were saying. They're not able to meet the commodity price demands because the market's getting flooded with cheaper products, cheaper produce. They can't keep up with it. And so I say, okay, if we're going to put tariffs on certain countries, it should be set by Congress as given by the Constitution. That's whose authority it lies on. When Donald Trump wakes up and says, Russia has a 100% tariff, or India has a 25% tariff, or China has a 50% tariff, that's a big problem. And I forget the fact that we're also funding 2 foreign wars abroad. In Ukraine and between Ukraine and Russia, and of course Israel and what's happening in the Middle East. That we all want to end ASAP because we want peace. Let me leave you with this one today. It says here, defense leaders to return Confederate memorial to Arlington Cemetery. This might be the only thing I like that Pete Hegseth has ever done. My God. It says here that Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth on Tuesday announced the controversial Reconciliation Monument sculpture that will return to Arlington National Cemetery in coming weeks. The latest move by the administration officials to return symbols honoring the Confederacy to military sites. Now, this was a whole big thing, especially under the Biden administration. You saw statues of American leaders being taken down and replaced with other people. Now, the news came just one day after the National Park Service unveiled plans to rebuild a statue commemorating Albert Pike, a Confederate brigadier general just a few blocks from the U.S. Capitol. And, here's the problem with this. Here's the problem. We see that the left loves to, again, foment this hate about what happened during the Civil War. And they got it all wrong. They got it all wrong. Now, most of you were probably told in school or in college or what have you that the Civil War was fought over slavery. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. That's not what it was fought over at all. That's not why the states seceded from the Union, the southern states, breaking off into the Confederacy. That's simply not what happened. I mean, you even had people like Robert E. Lee, who Lincoln wanted to fight in the Union, but he said, hey, I'm a Virginian, and I can't leave my people. I'm not going to go fighting against my own people, my own countrymen. See, back in the day, the states had more, I guess if you want to say solidarity. If you were from Virginia, you were from Virginia. That was like your country almost. That's how, strongly you held that in regard. So Robert E. Lee flat out told Lincoln, no, I'm not going to do that. Now, should we start destroying every Robert E. Lee statue because he fought for the Confederacy? No, of course not. Of course not. Now, again, you're told that the Confederacy started the war and all this other nonsense. It's simply not true. And the Confederacy, of course, is, they're being told that it was just fought to preserve slavery and it's racist. And these people were racist. First of all, the majority of the people that fought in the Confederacy were simply just poor farmers, most of them. Simply for that reason alone. None of them even owned slaves. So the idea all these men went to war to, again, preserve slavery is absolutely asinine in and of itself. People just don't understand the situation. And, we have to understand that Lincoln, whether you like him, love him, he is the founder of the Republican Party, of which I am. He's the one that started the war. That's the facts, folks. That's the facts. Lincoln started the war. Go look at what the moral tariff was and what he wanted to do. And many times it was called Lincoln's War. Or the War of Tariffs. And the South did not want to be put under these heavy tariffs, which again, I've told you, are taxes. They don't want you, they didn't want to do it. Lincoln went to the South basically and said, hey, we're going to have to put you on these higher taxes so we can help pay for this federal government. And they said, no, we're not doing that. Their ports were under basically free trade zones. It's basically zero tariffs or very, very small tariffs, if any. And the North knew they couldn't compete with that. They thought it was going to destroy the entire North. That was the whole reason for the war in and of itself. And, they're given this bad name. And I rarely come to the defense of Democrats, but they were Democratic. And yes, those were where the slaves were being held, primarily. But the idea that the whole war was fought over slavery, and this is who fought for each, is really, really stupid. I mean, you can't make this stuff up, folks. All right, folks, thank you for being here today with me. I appreciate you so much. I will see you tomorrow on the next Marco Dure Show. Until then, be good, stay great, and God bless.